All right, welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a really powerful chapter from the Quran, Surah An-Naba, which literally means the great news. And it gets right to the heart one of the biggest questions we all have. What happens after we die? So let's get into it and see what it has to say. Right from the very first verse, the chapter just drops us into the middle of a huge debate. It asks this question: what is this great news that people are arguing about so much? It immediately hooks you, right? You want to know what all the fuss is about. Okay, so this first part really sets the stage. The whole disagreement, the central argument, it's all about the afterlife. Specifically, this idea that we could be brought back to life after we're long gone. So to be super clear, the great news isn't some vague idea. It points to something very specific: the absolute certainty of resurrection and the accountability that comes with it. The core message is, yes, we will be brought back, and we're going to have to account for the lives we lived. And you can just hear the skepticism, can't you? This was the big pushback. People were saying, hold on, how can we possibly be raised again after our bodies have decomposed and literally turned to dust? From a purely physical standpoint, it just seemed impossible to them. And the surah's response to this, it's so direct. It basically says, look, you can argue about this all you want, you can deny it, you can doubt it, but that's not going to stop it from happening. The truth of it isn't up for a vote. It's a reality that is on its way. So, how do you convince someone of something they think is impossible? Well, the surah doesn't just demand blind faith. Instead, it lays out this beautiful logical argument by pointing to the world all around us, to evidence that we can see and touch every single day. And this is where the logic just flips the whole debate on its head. Instead of asking how can resurrection happen, it asks how could the one who created this entire mind-bogglingly complex universe not be able to resurrect you? It's an argument about scale, about power. And the evidence it presents is it's so beautifully simple. You know, look at the Earth, how it's this stable place for us to live. Look at the mountains, which act like giant pegs holding it all together. The fact that we're created in pairs. Even our daily cycle, sleep, is a kind of mini-death, and waking up is a mini-resurrection. But the killer argument, especially for people in the desert, was this last one. You see rain fall on dead, cracked earth, and suddenly, life explodes from it. It's like watching a mini-resurrection happen right before your eyes. So, all of this evidence builds up to one simple, powerful conclusion. If a creator has the power to design this entire cosmos with such incredible precision, then the act of recreating one human being, that's not just possible, it's perfectly logical. You know, this leads to a really profound point. The surah is arguing that bringing something back is actually easier than creating it from nothing in the first place. Think about it. If you build a complex Lego set, taking it apart and putting it back together is way easier than designing it from scratch. The bigger miracle, the creation of everything, has already happened. Okay, so after making the logical case for why resurrection is possible, the chapter pivots. The focus shifts from the how to the what. It starts to describe the event itself, and it's called the Day of Decision. And you can feel the tone change here. It becomes absolute. The language is all about certainty. This isn't a maybe or a someday. It's described as a fixed appointment, one that's already on the calendar and cannot be moved. And then you get this incredibly cinematic sequence of events. First, a trumpet blast. Then, all of humanity rises up in massive crowds. The sky itself, the thing that's always above us, is described as opening up like gateways. And the mountains, our symbols of permanence, just disappear. Everything we thought was solid and real starts to unravel. So, the message from all this intense imagery is crystal clear. Our time here, this journey through life, has a final, unavoidable, and absolute endpoint. There's no continuing on, no do-overs. This is it. So what happens next, after everything we know is gone? Well, the narrative moves on to the consequences of that day of decision. It lays out two totally different paths, two final destinations, and it all depends on how we lived our lives. And you can see the contrast so clearly here. On one side, you have those who were arrogant, who just rejected the truth and didn't want to be held accountable. For them, there's a punishment described as being perfectly just. But on the other side, for the God-conscious, those who lived their lives with an awareness of God, for them, it's gardens, peace, comfort, a reward straight from the source. So what this really boils down to is a kind of spiritual cause and effect. ignoring the truth isn't just a passive choice, it leads to a very real outcome. The path to what the Surah calls true success is through something called taqwa, this deep sense of God consciousness that shapes your actions. And this reward, it's not just some fairy tale, it's described as an earned mercy, something you receive because of the choices you made.
Now we're at the end of the chapter, and it closes not with the beautiful description of paradise, but with one final urgent warning that brings everything right back to us, right here, right now.
This idea is so powerful. Our deeds, good and bad, aren't just moments that vanish. The surah describes them as things we are literally sending forward. And on that day, we're going to come face to face with the complete portfolio of everything we sent ahead of us.
And this is where the whole thing comes full circle in the most haunting way. The very same people who started out asking, "How can we come back from dust?" will, in that final moment of regret, wish for nothing more than to just become dust again, just to escape the consequences.
And that's the final message. It's a wake-up call, really. The time to decide what you're sending forward isn't later. It's not tomorrow. It's now. It's a warning given as a mercy, a chance to get things right before that moment of regret is locked in forever.
So, if we boil it all down, what are the core lessons from the great news? First, the afterlife isn't just some side belief, it's the central truth. Second, you don't need to look far for proof. Creation itself is the evidence. Third, justice will eventually be perfect and absolute. And finally, and maybe most importantly, the time to make your choice is right now.
And that's the question the Surah leaves us with. It stops being about a debate from long ago and becomes intensely personal. Knowing that the choice is now and that regret is permanent, it asks every single one of us, what are you going to send forward?